Hey everyone, welcome to episode 7 of Cloud Conversations with Rue and Pete. I'm Rue, joined as always by the partner in crime, security and compliance legend and author, Pete Rising. Pete, how's it going?
It's going great, Rue. How are you today?
All good, all good. It's reasonably sunny with a hint of grey, which is about as good as it gets here. So I'll take it. Put me in a little bit of a good mood. And we're also joined, I guess, by Kat.
Hi, Rue. Hi, Pete.
Yeah, welcome to the show, Kat. It's lovely to have you join us on Cloud Conversations, episode 7. I think it's episode 7. Last time when I introduced the show, I got the number wrong. I said 5 instead of 6, but we can't be perfect. We can't be perfect. We're still learning this, but we are absolutely delighted to be joined by Kat Greenan this afternoon, today, whatever time you're watching this. We're recording it in an afternoon. But so, Kat, would you just like to introduce yourself? Tell the watchers and listeners a bit about yourself, where you're from, and what you do, and how you got to where you are today.
Yeah, sure. So I'm Kat. My role at the moment is a Microsoft Solutions Specialist. And I work for a Microsoft Gold partner called Core Technology Systems. And how I got there today is a bit of an odd-ish story. So you can probably tell by my accent, I am from Scotland. So I was born in Edinburgh and moved around quite a lot when I was younger. And I eventually ended up in South Wales. Don't ask me how. So I ended up in South Wales, where I went to university, and after university did a bit of traveling. And I actually did door-to-door charity fundraising for about a year and a half, where it was, talking to people at their houses and out in the wonderful sunny South Wales weather that we're known for. And from there, my partner and I decided to move to London. And so I had one of my friends who was he worked in recruitment in London. I got in touch with him, and they were looking at different roles for tech companies. And I thought, I could maybe do some tech. So I came from a completely non-technical background. I'd done a bit of teaching, I'd done a bit of retail and a bit of door-to-door. And then I joined Core about 5 years ago as a customer success manager. Now, the role of the customer success manager was to speak to customers. It was someone who could obviously have a conversation, who can kind of speak to customers about their products and, how to get the best use out of them. And doing that role as non-technical, I'd come from a non-IT background. I, had to understand the concept of the cloud, and it was a whole different kind of environment for me. And then from there, I was lucky enough when I was doing customer success, I was doing demonstrations to customers about technology, and started really, really enjoying that side of it. So I kind of spoke to my boss and said, look, there's bits of my job that I really, I really like. Is there any way I can do a bit more of that? And that's how I'd kind of transitioned a couple of years ago into a Microsoft Solutions Specialist role, where I am now at Core, where I focus primarily on the collaboration aspect of Microsoft 365, so Teams, SharePoint, Viva, that sort of thing, working with our customers on their kind of tech journey. But I kind of, came from a bit of a different background. I didn't do tech at university or anything like that. I did film studies. So it's slightly different coming in and moving into, that kind of role. So it's been fun.
Awesome. We hear this so often as well from a lot of people we talk to, that it's an accidental thing. It certainly was for me all those years ago, back in the mid 90s, showing my age. But similar thing for me. It was completely accidental getting into tech, and it's so amazing how often you find that happening. And would you say that coming into tech though, and was it a steep learning curve for you and changing into that sort of role, or did you take to it like a duck to water? Was it easy a process, or how was that for you?
I kind of put myself in situations where I like to feel nervous, and I don't know why. It's a weird thing I have. I like to feel like I'm got butterflies in my tummy and push myself into situations. So It was difficult. I remember I was studying, like trying to learn about Teams and learn about telephony and all this stuff, and like spent a lot of extra time trying to like understand licensing as well. So I did licensing at core, and that was a whole concept I didn't understand. So I was lucky enough to be able to be that type of person that would push myself to get into that kind of role. And luckily, the customer success role, it was a gradual. First of all, you have a chat with customers, then you start doing demonstrations, then you start having to like learn the tool a little bit more. So it was a bit gradual, but it was still from someone who's not come from an IT or a technical background, even understanding the concept of it was quite difficult. Azure was a whole ball game. I just was, oh my goodness, I had to sit there and like, okay, I'm going to draw like a data warehouse and draw a server so I can physically understand the concept of it. So I would say not the detail, it's more the concept of technology that I struggled with a little bit and had to kind of, sit down and really understand. But yeah, I feel like there are people out there who are in that situation. You do get there in the end. Just, you need to, sit down and kind of understand the concept.
Well, if you can understand the licensing, then you can understand anything. I'm always amazed when folk have to do that for a living, but because it can get really almost as technical as the technical stuff, the licensing, especially in Azure, where it's all based on consumption and things like that. But it's funny you mentioned how you kind of got that nervousness, I guess, insofar as being maybe just a little bit out your depth. Is that the idea? Because me and Peter have spoken about this quite a lot, insofar as it's quite a nice feeling. Maybe nice isn't the right word, but it can be an exciting feeling. Yeah.
1,000%. It's that little bit above. So I would want to push myself and offer and say, I want to do, full day workshops on Teams for customers. And before then, I'd maybe done an hour of like a bit of a training session. And I kind of said, okay, can I take these on? And I knew I'd have to learn a lot and kind of do it. And I loved it. And I, when beforehand, anything like that, you get the butterflies, you get nervous, and then you're doing it and you don't really realize you're doing it because you're in the moment. And then afterwards, the rush that you get from like, oh my goodness, that was just like, you feel it in your bones. And I love that feeling after, the nervousness. And I think that's what I crave. So I constantly am I'm just in a constant state of nerves.
But you're looking for things outside of your comfort zone, though, clearly, which I do as well. And I don't know why I do this, because I've got enough problems in life as it is. I make things deliberately hard for myself, but I think I've mentioned this to anyone who will listen to this adage that I love is the old Richard Branson one of if someone asks you if you can do something and you don't think that you can, or you don't know that you can, say yes anyway and then learn how to do it.
Yeah.
and I've done that so much. Yeah, that's how you learn, definitely, so much indeed. But moving on anyway, just I think it's, from what you've said already, I think it's fairly obvious what your answer to this may be, but I'm going to ask you anyhow, which Microsoft 365 product or feature would you think is your current favorite, and why?
So, well, I think you know the answer, but yes, I'm a huge Teams champion, massive. And I remember I started at Core before Teams was released. And I, was a huge kind of Office 365 guys. Let's, make sure we're using Yammer and SharePoint, and Teams came in. So I was the Teams champion at Core, and I was in charge of just the training sessions and building excitement and, getting us ready to use it. And ever since then, I've been kind of, if there's any customer conversations with Teams, I typically get involved. It's one of those pieces of technology that I love. There's little features and things which you'll actually find. I'll plug this on my blog, cloudwithcat.com. There we are. But yes, it's for, thank you, very smooth. So it is for tips and tricks on using Microsoft Teams. So there's loads of little things like that just make it a great product. But it's something that's just changed the world. I mean, we went into a situation last year. People were using Teams and, using it as we'll do some collaboration and have some meetings on it. But it actually has solved, like, for students being able to learn, and teachers, government organizations still being able to work, and it's all done through Teams. I just think that's incredible. A a product can have that impact on the world. So I think, if it wasn't my favorite before, it definitely is now, in the way that we've seen it grow and being used in the last year, definitely.
Oh, fantastic. It's just scary how much a 4.5-year-old product like Teams has developed and grown in that space of time. Even without COVID, before COVID, it was already a monster. The fastest adopted product in Microsoft's history, I believe it was. But now, unbelievable. And you mentioned a little bit about the telephony and the voice side of Teams as well. Is that something that you've done a fair bit with? Because I've noticed that that's come more and more into play in recent times. Maybe a year or so ago in my role, I would have said to people, it's not mature enough yet, it's not quite ready, but that is definitely not the case now. Have you been getting involved in that side of it?
Yes, definitely. So that's when we have a customer who says, oh, I don't know Teams, I don't know if we want to use that for telephony or not. So we'll do full day workshops. We'll go through the art of the possible. What can you do in Teams versus your old system that you're using now? Let's look at what's the best migration path for you? Do you want to do direct routing? Do you want to stick to the calling plans? What we're finding is there's so many organizations, it's always the fear of, oh, I don't want to move into something until everybody else does. Like when they upgraded everything to E5 licensing, there was a whole bunch of people saying, oh, we won't buy E5, not yet, wait until everyone else does it. But now it's in the situation where people have made such an investment to Microsoft and they're using Teams because they're in the situation where everyone's working from home. You need to have that type of quick contact, and landlines and phones just aren't the way of the future at all. So because organizations have made such an investment into their licensing and their users are already using Teams, it's kind of like a nice win to have everything being in one tool. So a lot more organizations I'm working with anyway, we talk a lot about Teams telephony. And a little bit more now that we're going back to the office, Teams meetings as well, meeting room devices. So we're having a bit more of those conversations as well. But yeah, we're definitely seeing an increase in that.
Some of those Teams devices are getting quite cool. So, for example, I've seen one at the petri.com Teams Day, and there's another plug for you, where it was, for example, Dell monitors and things like that, where it's kind of Teams integrated in the monitor, insofar as it's got a Teams button and things like that. And I guess that's going forward. Pete mentioned it's only a 4-year-old product. It's kind of, I can't really predict where it's going to go next, insofar as I just know it's going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and adoption is going to increase and increase and increase. And one of the things that looks like is going to be a driving factor behind that is Microsoft Viva, insofar as, maybe it's more of a SharePoint thing, but Teams is just a nice like a paint over SharePoint. Where do you think Viva is going to go forward for folks, and actually how are they going to use it in real life?
So I think an important thing to note is there's kind of 4 different aspects or products or modules, Microsoft call it, to Viva. And what we're finding when we're speaking to customers, there's Viva Connections has for us been the most popular type of conversation. And the reason for that is because we have customers who had a problem, which was we're using SharePoint, we're using Yammer, and we're using Teams. We've got 3 different tools. They all integrate, which is nice, but there's still 3 tools. For our internet, you still have to go away in a different site, and it's all a bit it's still a bit segmented, and they kind of question, should we keep our internet, should we just remove it and just stick to a Teams org-wide team? And we're just like, no, don't do that. But they then brought out Viva Connections, and when we had a phone call with them, we kind of showed them a demonstration of it, and they said, this is exactly what we wanted. This is what we needed. So it's solving a huge kind of problem of all those tools being segregated, bringing everything into one place. I think Viva is going to be as important, if not more, than Teams, I would say, from our perspective, speaking to customers. And we tend to find that there's some of the modules that shout out as more useful for a customer or more relevant to what they're looking for now. But what we typically find is we'll speak to a customer and they initially will turn around and say, oh yeah, Viva Connections, that's the one for us. Never mind all the rest, it's Viva Connections for us. And then we do a demonstration and a bit of a business use case of all the different modules, and they turn around like, no, it's learning, it's definitely learning. So they'll change it by the time we end the session because there's value in all of them. So I see it being a critical tool in terms of being able to have everything in Teams. It is just, that's it, it's everything. in that one product. So yeah.
Nice. And I guess just I don't know if it's been announced. I'm completely in the blank here, but is Viva going to be a separately licensed product, or how can folk expect to have to? Do they have to cough up extra for that?
So it's a bit of a mix. So Viva Connections, you will get as part of your typical E3 licensing, where you can bring your SharePoint internet. As long as you've got a communication site in SharePoint, you can bring that into Teams, and you're using Yammer, so it connects Yammer into that dashboard. The other kind of tools, so like Viva Learning, some of that will be included. So the learning from like LinkedIn and Microsoft Learning will be included in your licensing. But if you wanted third-party training providers, content, that's additional costs. With Insights, you will get Insights. It's actually essentially the workplace analytics license. So it's essentially that. If you want your own kind of, set focus time for the employee and things like that, that's included. But there is a manager's view and an organization view where you get further analytics on your team and you can see if there's going to be burnout or not. Those are additional costs. And then there's Viva Topics, which is outright an additional cost. I think it's about $4 per user per month. So there's a mix in between. That's why when we speak to customers, let's find out which one or which few of the modules, it could be all of them, is actually going to be your solve for your problem that you're facing. And then work out the licensing. What licensing do you need? Do you need the add-ons? Do you not? And go from there. So the answer is it's a bit of a mix. Never easy with licensing, as always, isn't it? So
no, it's not. But
this is my life.
That's really good information, and that's quite illuminating because I really didn't have a clue whether or not, it was all great stuff, but whether or not there'd be a cost associated with that. So it's good to know that at least if someone's interested in the more basic side of it and they're not looking at third parties for learning, they can get that as part of E3. And the other question that comes to mind when I think about Teams and I think about Viva, where does Yammer sit as part of all this? And Yammer's always been a bit of a funny one to me anyway, insofar as I see some customers go quite all in on it, and then I see others dip their toes in it, don't maybe put a whole lot of effort into getting that adoption piece, and then decide it's a failure and they move on to something else, like an org-wide team or something like that. Yes. So where do you see Yammer just now, and where do you see it in the future?
So I think if there was one thing that Microsoft had, something that they could improve on is the support of Yammer and the marketing of Yammer. I've had so many customers say, Yammer dead then? It's Teams, isn't it? Yammer's dead and Teams has replaced it. I'm just like, no. So I, at the moment, I have the same view as you. I see we use Yammer at Core very heavily, and I'm a huge advocate of Yammer. I think it serves a different purpose to Teams in SharePoint. It's got its place, and it delivers a great solution to those companies where they have every single piece of update or announcement is through a company-wide email and clogs up everyone's inbox. There's no place to ask an open question if someone's new and they don't know the answer. So I think Yammer is just such a great tool, and everybody thinks that Teams is replacing it. So we have there's maybe 1 in 60 customers who think about using Yammer, who are considering it or who are using it. And I always talk about Yammer when we talk about Teams and the integration and SharePoint as well, because it comes together. And Microsoft Viva, when you are using Viva Connections, you can have Yammer integrated as like a dashboard. You can see the updates, and it's just going to be. It's not like you're using Yammer, it's just integrated into just one solution. So for the end user, it's going to be a lot more seamless and easier to use. I think Microsoft are doing a lot to Yammer. So they have rebranded it. They are adding a huge amount of functionality to it. There's things that you can do with Teams, like the live events. You could stream that live through Yammer and things like that. So from a Microsoft perspective, it's not going anywhere. It's definitely a tool that serves its purpose. Well, the thing I would say is that I think it's just been missed in terms of there's customers who, because it hasn't had as much marketing or attention as Teams, they're missing out on such a great tool because they just don't think it's worth, it's a tool that's going to stay. So I'd say that's one thing that if any Microsoft more for Yammer.
Yeah, that is so true. A lot of people do think it's dead or is going, and it's not the case. Microsoft are invested in it. I mean, I think a year or 2 years ago, maybe now, I think Microsoft said it was going to be the year of Yammer, and didn't really take off so much. But they're invested in it. They're my own opinion. It's a Marmite product, and it's a niche product in many ways. And you're going to have very divisive conversations about Yammer, whoever you speak to. I've not particularly warm to it, if I'm honest. I kind of wonder why it's still here in some ways, but then I look at it and I look at that one-to-all approach that you mentioned for company-wide communications from leadership teams. It works well for that, and yeah, you can do live event stuff with it as well. But Microsoft don't seem to want to kill it, so they're going to keep on at it, and will they find the right balance for it in time? Time will tell. Time will tell. But it's got a long way to go if it's going to challenge Teams for that crown of being the best product. So yeah, and you've kind of already answered a question, and well, I'll ask this anyway, because you may. It sounds like you wouldn't have said Yammer as your answer, but what I was going to ask is, which product or feature do you think has missed the mark in recent years from Microsoft, and what do you think Microsoft could do to improve it? Would Yammer have been your answer, or can you think of something else that might fit that bill?
I mean, I would definitely say they've missed the mark with Yammer, not because it's a bad product, because they're not selling it enough in terms of the benefits it can bring to an organization. I would say, Yammer's probably my answer to that one. The only other thing I would say is we have had lots of customers who kind of, the aspect of with Microsoft Teams, and I know I'd never say anything bad about Microsoft Teams, but there are some flaws in terms of governance with Microsoft Teams. So there's a lot of customers who we have spoken to who turned on Microsoft Teams for the organization, and there's just I don't think there was, not anyway, 6 months ago anyway, there was enough awareness of things like team sprawl and external participants automatically being on for organizations who they don't know what some customers I speak to don't know what that means for external and guest access. And that's such a crucial kind of point of, you could add anybody into your team. It's something to be considered and thought about and planned. So I would just say having with Teams a little bit more guidance on governance, some more tooling. There's things out there like the expiration and the naming conventions, which are quite good. But I just think a little bit more on that, because that's where we tend to find most of our customers are in a bad situation with Teams. That's, we can come back from that, but it makes their users not want to use it because there's just too many teams. It's too, convoluted. So I would just say, if I was going to say one negative about my favorite product, it would be that.
I have that discussion with my wife, who's a lecturer and uses Zoom quite a lot, and we have a kind of theological discussion about Zoom versus Teams. And obviously, I'm a Microsoft guy, so I try and encourage her to use Teams, but she does raise a few points every now and then, insofar as there are certain things in Teams that you would just expect to be intuitive that maybe aren't so intuitive. And one of the ones that keeps rearing its head is the whole is guest access and external access. The tenant switching thing is moving from team to team. That's my understanding is they announced some time ago on the roadmap that you would have one smooth interface, and you could see all the teams you're a member of, regardless of which was the source tenant. And then it just seems to have never came to fruition. Do you find that that's a common problem? Because if I'm being picky about Teams, that's really the only thing that still bugs me.
Yes, definitely. And customers are saying this to me as well. And I've kind of fed that back to Microsoft, because it's a huge issue. If I'm speaking to a customer and, I'm like, oh, why don't you check the team that we're in on that file, and that's where you'll find it. And then we go to do it, and I'm like, oh, no, we can't, because it'll hang up the call that we're on if I try and change my my tenant to go look in your team to look in that file. So they've changed the interface of it, so it's a little bit easier to switch to organizations. And they have mentioned soon bringing out something that will just make it a little bit smoother. But it's definitely something that is a causes a few issues with us and some of our customers.
I think shared channels, or Teams Connect as they're calling it, will be a big help in that tenant switching experience. I think that's going to help a lot, won't it? Do you know, have you heard much about Teams Connect and shared channels? Like, something you're excited about?
I am really excited about it. There is, we just have had so many, because when I speak to customers, we introduce Teams, and I do speak to a lot of their end users as well. And the amount of issues that just come up in terms of, if you want to share a channel with someone, but you don't want them to be in the whole team, you have to invite them to the whole team. They have to see everything. And we're not going to have every channel as private channels because you can only have 50. And that just, it defeats the point of group collaboration. And so that is, I've been telling all my customers, look out for this. It's all those complaints that you sent me that you were saying it's going to solve a lot. So yeah, I'm aware. I'm so very excited about it. I think it's going to be a good one.
And having the ability to have external parties in those shared channels is going to be so good, isn't it? That's going to be a game changer. So hopefully that's going to be soon. We're looking out for that. But it was announced at Ignite, I think, wasn't it? But not much more just yet. Another thing I want to ask you actually about on your favorite subject again of Teams is, obviously last year there was a massive rush, understandably so, to adopt Teams very, very quickly for organizations who needed to support remote working during pandemic life. Are you now finding that customers are now coming back to you after they just got Teams out in any way, shape or form that they needed to at the time, and they're now coming back and wanting to have conversations about security and compliance and retention and DLP and that sort of stuff? Are those conversations you're starting to have now?
Yeah, most of the conversations. There's we used to do, so I had to help with some adoption and change management, and we'd always say, you want to do like a 6-week communication plan, get people excited, you want to do training, resistance management, there's a whole kind of step process to it. Whereas we're now in a situation where it's swapped round. People are already using it. They're already, fully on board with it, but it's all about best practice on how to use things in the best way. Because with Teams, the buttons will change every week or so. There's no point learning where the buttons are. You'll get to know those as you use it. But it is best practice. When should you create a team versus when should you create a group chat? Where should you do your file collaboration? How should you use the post area to, it can reduce your emails, but if it's not used properly, it can just get a bit of a mess. So we're in that situation now. We're doing best practices. Security and compliance is a huge one. So we have lots of customers who are looking at like data loss prevention for Teams in E5. So, being able to prevent like credit card numbers from being shared in a chat and things like that. And now customers, and there's so many customers who just aren't aware of what they've bought. In Microsoft 365 E3, you've got Azure Information Protection. I saw your blog actually, Rue, on some of those tips on Azure Information Protection. So I did read that. It was great. But they're just not aware that they have it. I introduced Azure Information Protection to customers, which is where you can label your teams with sensitivity labels, and it doesn't require E5. You've got that in E3. And it just the showing them that and just saying you've already got it, you don't need to pay the license for it, and they're just like, "What? We've got this. We just need to deploy it." And I was like, "Well, there's a bit of planning and a bit of work, creating the labels and so on." But yeah, people just don't know what they have. So that's a big conversation. Is you've made this huge investment, but you don't even know what you've bought.
Yep, so true. Yep, so true. Yeah. You'll get no end to the kind of fanboyism of AIP from myself and Pete.
I know no means a compliance or security expert, so I'll leave that to you guys.
The thing that bugs me so much though is, why is DLP an E5 feature for Teams? I just do not get that.
That's just people are so unhappy when I say, okay, just to caveat, here's the little red line over Teams and channels. This is E5, or you can buy it as an add-on, but it's a package add-on. It's Office 365 compliance as an add-on, and that gives you that. But by the time you buy that, you might as well upgrade with the cost of it. So
compliance in Teams itself is quite a minefield. A little plug from me now. I've got a little article coming out on Practical 365 sometime in the next few days, I think, maybe this week, about talking about compliance in Teams. And it's really bizarre how it works, and it's all down to the fact of the lack of APIs in Teams and that sort of thing. But a lot of people don't realize that the compliance records that you can use in retention policies and e-discovery searches for Teams are not actually interrogating Teams itself, because that data is stored in the Azure Cosmos database in something called the Microsoft 365 substrate. And then imperfect copies of that data are copied to individual Teams mailboxes or group mailboxes in Exchange Online, and that's what you're doing for retention policies. So, so yeah, it's a right old minefield, and there are things in there that aren't covered at the minute, like reactions, but they're coming.
Yeah.
But it's a heck of a minefield.
Yeah, there is just a little something that always I just mention when we speak to customers about retention in Teams. So when you have a meeting with an external party, you can't put retention policies on their chat messages in the meeting, because their chat is stored in their Exchange Online mailbox, which is under their retention rules. So although in a retention policy, we could do it with our own members in our organization, we could delete it after a certain amount of time. We can't control the external person's chats or information in the meeting unless they are logged in on their guest account. If they're using a guest account and join the meeting, then you can. But if they're external and they just click the link, then they can't. So that's always just something that comes up as well. So just an FYI for anybody out there.
I think we could talk about Teams and tech and career all day. We've spent a lot of time talking about that so far, but wanting to change track a little bit just now and talk a little bit about life and community and journeys and that sort of thing. And first and foremost, you've become a very active member of the wider Microsoft tech community, which consists of a lot of different activities. Can you explain to people what that is, what it means to you, and the sort of things that you can do on this wider community?
Yeah, I think so. Just on the community, it's such a great. I didn't know it existed, if I'm honest, until when I was a customer success manager. I used to create these how-to videos for my customers and send it to them because that was part of the job. So I thought, okay, I'll just post those on social media as well as a start to just share the knowledge. And as soon as you start, being a little bit more active on social media with being passionate about things like that, you tend to find like people reach out to you and they connect with you, and so you get kind of the community kind of opens up and like sucks you in and so you get connected with lots of people, and everyone's kind of asking questions and sharing tips and really supportive. And there's people like you, Pete, reached out to me. There's kind of MVPs that have reached out, and we've had conversations. So everybody's really willing to learn and share and make that community bigger and better. So I think it's been that's been one of the best things about kind of sharing content and sharing information is being involved and having the support from the community. And some of the things that I do now, there's my blog that I mentioned, Collab with Cats, which is tips and tricks on using Microsoft Teams. I also have a YouTube channel, which does the same thing, but it's just videos, how-to videos to use Teams, which is not necessarily focused on IT or administrators. It's more just for the end user, just how to use it in the best way possible, tips and tricks that I've picked up. So that's what I tend to share and get involved in conferences and things like that. But I just think I've never met such a lovely group of people, and people are so open to collaborate and help and support and share. And I just think it's been a really positive experience I've had anyway from it.
Yeah, it's such a great community. There's no one-upmanship or can you say that anymore?
It's no competitiveness.
No competitiveness, is there? No.
Yeah, it's all support.
Exactly. Everyone wants to support each other and lift each other up, and it's so lovely. And it's full of people from who just do it for the love of it. It's got MVPs in it. It's got people from Microsoft in it. A good example of that is our good pal Alan Erdley, who recently left CPS to join Microsoft, and he's had to retire his MVP because when you go to Microsoft you can't be an MVP, which is obvious, but and he said, well, I'm not going to stop doing all this community stuff because I love it. He's going to keep on doing the user groups and the speaking, and everyone has a real passion for it and gets a real buzz out of being able to pass on what they've learned and help and all that sort of stuff. And that's certainly how it is for me, and I think it is for you as well, Rue. I know you found that it's a very compelling and addictive journey, and you can't help just wanting to be involved in it, can you?
Yeah, it is. And I occasionally post on the Microsoft Tech Community, their official forum, but then also the social media platforms. And I get different things out of the different platforms. So I find that the conversations and the way that you connect with folk on LinkedIn is different than on Twitter. Different folks seem to gravitate to different types of platform, and then the discussion also is just different depending on what platform it is. So for example, on Twitter, I find that there seems to be a bit more technical discussion ongoing, but it maybe isn't always as, what would you say? It isn't always as easy to follow just because of the constraints of that platform, insofar as people are cramming in a whole lot of information and not a whole lot of text. But then I jump over to LinkedIn, you can get these massive kind of threads and posts that go on in LinkedIn. And I also find it's easier for folk to stay in touch on LinkedIn, if that makes sense. And I think it's because when you connect with someone on LinkedIn, it's usually a mutual. So you connect with me and I connect with you. On Twitter, I follow you. You don't necessarily follow me back. And so I find that the conversation obviously differs that way, and the relationship you have with someone can be different depending on what platform you're talking to them on. Twitter can also feel a little bit, hesitant to say this, it can get a little bit toxic at times, insofar as, I don't know if it's the algorithms or whatever, but it seems to constantly be encouraging folk to get really politicized and all that kind of stuff. And I think as a community, we need to kind of stay away from that. We need to talk about the right thing when the time is appropriate. And, if there's something going on in the world, we need to discuss that. But I think on the whole, we need to remember that we're all in this together. It's just about folks helping each other figure stuff out, and that's the way it should be. And I do find for the most part that is the case. But again, sometimes you do sometimes see that little competitive element in folk come out. But I think that's a minority.
Yeah, I think so too. I think in our community, it's very, very minimal indeed. As we've already said, I think most people you tend to find that on Twitter as a whole, there's a little bit of that toxicity sometimes, but in our community, very, very, very little, thankfully.
Totally agree.
Which is a good thing. But funny, I did ironically a LinkedIn post about this a few days ago, saying that I'm finding Twitter a bit more where I'm gravitating to recently, rather than LinkedIn. Right. Which is strange. I didn't think that would ever be the case, because Twitter was always an afterthought for me. LinkedIn was where it was first, but I'm finding I'm tweeting a lot more. I'm putting more content on Twitter, and I'm enjoying it. And I'm thinking, it's a bit of a chore. I've got to put this on LinkedIn now as well. So, and I never thought I'd feel like that. But don't touch Facebook. Facebook's dead.
Why do you think that is? Why do you think you're more drawn to the Twitter thing rather than LinkedIn now?
I really don't know. I don't know. It feels like you get more engagement sometimes on Twitter. It feels like you get a bit more retweets, a bit more responses and that sort of thing. But I don't know. It's horses for courses. I might switch back again at some point, but who knows? I'm very changeable. But I love Twitter at the moment, though. It's so good. But what I do want to ask, though, along the lines of something we've already touched on a little bit with Teams and Viva, is a little bit about work-to-life balance, which is obviously a big thing at the moment in the world. And how would you say that you are affected by that, Kat? Is that something that you've got figured out, or something you need to work on? Are you using the tools in Viva to help you with focus time? Where are you at with work-life balance?
So I think I'm okay at work-life balance. I like to manage my own time very well, which is why I'm really glad at Core I manage my own diary, which I feel like I just need that control. And so I really like making sure, if I need to prepare for anything, I put in time to prepare. So I use my analytics, we use Insights, and it does give you that time to book focus time. But I kind of do it. I did it anyway. If I need to prepare for this, if I need to create this presentation, there are things that go out of work hours. Like, if we're doing blogs or, I'm doing a conference or anything, you don't really have time to do it in the work hours. You tend to do it in the evenings or in the weekends, which is fine. I'm happy with that. But I can control that and choose, when I spend that time to work. So I think I do have a decent work-life balance. They both melt into each other just because that's the way of life, isn't it? Which I am, happy with. But I think some of the things that I quite like are in Teams. On the mobile, you can turn off your notifications after like 7 o'clock, so you're not getting pinged. As some people at Core who do like to send me a message at 9 o'clock at night. I'm like, nope, it's not the time or the place. If it's an emergency, you'll phone me.
Exactly.
And so that function in Teams is quite nice, where you can kind of mute some notifications, in the evening, because it's healthy to have your own time. But then, just make sure that you're, actually getting the stuff done is the main thing. So yes, I think it's just because I need the control. That's just why I just need to have everything, blocked out and done. So I think that it has its negatives, that personality trait, but also its positives.
Yeah, muting conversations in Teams chat is a very, very good thing. But one thing that I don't believe you can do yet, I might be wrong, but I know that you can do in WhatsApp, which I really like, is that you can mute a conversation for a period of time and say, mute this for 8 hours or a day or whatever. And I think that's really good. So that would be good to have in Teams if it doesn't. It's not already there, is it? I don't think it is.
No, it's not already there. There's a mute conversation, and then it's a manual unmute.
That's right.
I think I might have seen something on User Voice actually that had because they are trying to there are organizations who are using WhatsApp, and IT don't want their obviously employees to use WhatsApp for work. It's just it's not good. And so they're saying Teams on the mobile is great because you've got the notifications like WhatsApp. You can have group chats. It's got the history just like WhatsApp does. It's a bit more easier to use with the files and things like that, but there's features like that, the mute and things that you need to be able to do. So I think there is something on User Voice on that. If not, there should be.
Definitely. But then again, Microsoft I believe they've walked away from User Voice. I don't think they're doing it anymore, are they? Which is a bizarre decision. I don't quite know why.
They're about to run a bulldozer over it, aren't they? They're replacing it with something proprietary, I think. So User Voice is a third-party service that any company can go out and use. And I think they're replacing it with something of their own. Makes me kind of nervous, though, if I'm being honest. I trust they'll do the right thing, but User Voice has been amazing insofar as you can Google something and see, oh, wait a second, it's not just me. Click. Hopefully it gets on the roadmap eventually.
Yeah, definitely. And it was the most up-to-date thing I can share with my customers. It was, they've got the roadmaps, which are like, Q3, and then it'll be pushed out. Whereas User Voice, it was specific features, which had votes, and then you would see if it was in development on the backlog, and you'd have people actually responding to it. It was just a lot more accurate, I found, than like the general roadmap that they post online. So gutted about that, but
and one that we're all waiting for, of course, is, and I believe it's coming, isn't it, is replying to individual messages in the app.
Like WhatsApp again.
I was saying to Rue the other day, quite often, I mean, I'm working on my laptop, my Mac, or my Windows device, and in Teams, I get so frustrated sometimes. I reach for my iPhone so I can reply properly. So it'd be so nice when that finally arrives.
Yes.
But I believe it's coming, which is good. So, fantastic. But interesting, that work-life balance thing, though, and I think it affects people like ourselves who are M365 modern workplace consultants and architects, but we're also in this community as well, and it's kind of like our job and our hobby, so it's double whammy there, and that we've got to switch off from it twice. And I can be on my laptop at 9 o'clock at night, and my wife is, Peter, enough already, put it down. you've got a family, you've got things to do, and she's entirely right. But it gets so addictive, it really does. It's just and I've been writing an article today on my Sunday to publish on Petri.com as well. So I need to get better at it. I really need to start using some of these Viva tools and having some time off and thinking about other things. And
it's true. It's true though. I mean, I'm borderline workaholic anyway, and it's sometimes I do worry about it insofar as it probably doesn't go more than, I'm not even exaggerating when I say it probably doesn't even go more than half an hour to an hour, even outside working hours, where something to do with Microsoft 365 just pops into my mind or something. And maybe it does come down to the social media insofar as it's always with you and you always just one scroll away from being drawn back into work. And I guess this is maybe shifting gears a little bit when I think about the work-life thing, and also thinking back to how earlier you mentioned you didn't necessarily go to uni and study anything technical at college or IT or things like that. Do you think that changes? Has that made it? Do you therefore have other hobbies as a result of not being engrossed in it and kind of steeped in it from a young age? Do you still have stuff that you can hark back to? How does that kind of affect your personal life?
Yeah, I mean, I still have other hobbies. So I said I studied film in university and school, and my partner also studied film. So we're big movie advocates in the house. So if it's not, looking at blogs and looking at what's going on, we're watching films.
Nice.
And yeah, my favorite genre is 90s disaster films.
Oh, wow. That's
so
a
I'll
niche one,
rewatch.
but nice.
It is niche, but I'll rewatch all my 90s disasters every year. Just rewatch them all. Independence Day, Volcano.
Awesome.
Love it. Love it. But yeah, so that's
Dante's Peak. Does that
Dante's
count?
Peak. Yes, it
Dante's
does count.
Peak.
Yes.
Yep.
Deep Impact.
Oh, I love
we can
Deep
list them all.
Impact.
Yeah,
What a
see,
great
it's
film.
all coming out now.
Yeah.
I'm getting you
Deep
all back
Impact.
in.
So good.
There's
I nearly
Core
spoiled
as well.
something there for anyone who hasn't
No,
seen it.
yeah,
but
no. Armageddon. Just
we
love
watched
it.
Core just recently.
Did you?
Two-Face. What's the fella's the actor's name? Is it?
I
Not in
can't
it.
remember. I know who you mean.
Aaron
though.
Eckhart, I think. Is it
Oh,
Aaron
yeah,
Eckhart that's in
Aaron
it?
Yeah.
Eckhart, yeah.
Blonde.
Because my wife's a geologist, and so she understands how the Earth
How they
works
go
and all
in
that.
and
Yeah, and she just found it hilarious. Because
it's so
outlandish.
impossible.
Yeah,
We're gonna get a big machine and we're gonna go to the Earth's core. That's that. What a premise.
One
Love
film
it.
I really like from the 90s, I don't think you would say it was a disaster film as such, but it's one I really love, is Cliffhanger with Sylvester Stallone. Is
classic.
Such a good movie.
Yeah, it's just Die Hard, but on a mountain.
Yeah.
On a mountain, yeah. And there's that scene at the really start, which again, I'll not spoil it for anyone who hasn't seen it, where you think something's going to happen, but it doesn't work out that way. And every time I watch it, even though I've seen it 100 times, I still think it's going to go a different way, but it doesn't. But so cool. But funny, we should bring up movies, and I think we might incorporate this into our regular chats with our upcoming guests. Our last guest was Rudy Ooms, who was a big movie buff, and you asked him a question, Rue, of Terminator 1 or Terminator 2, and are those films you like, Kat? And if so, would you have a preference?
Yeah, I don't know why you would choose Terminator 2.
Wow.
I honestly Rude, having a heart attack.
I just me off.
I think we all chose Terminator 2, didn't we, last time?
Terminator 1, I would say, definitely.
Well, there we go.
Wow.
I think we might have to start keeping a scoreboard on this. We might have to get it as a regular
absolutely.
feature on the show where we ask every guest T1 or T2.
And also use it to decide who gets to come back or not. That's the
yeah. But and the other thing I think we should probably incorporate into this as well is that, have you seen The Big Lebowski?
Yes, I have.
Because I hadn't seen it.
Have you? Oh, John Goodman.
Now.
Oh, yeah.
I have now. Yeah.
Very good. Very good. Love.
Yeah, I didn't realize
the
just
Coen
what
brothers.
cult classic it was. I'd heard of it, but I didn't realize how big it was and what a niche sort of cult following it had. And Rue and Rudy last week said, "You got to watch this." So I went straight off and watched it on Netflix and was instantly blown away by it.
Amazing.
I'll probably watch it again really quickly and get up to speed on all of the very quotable aspects of it. But because I do love movie quotes and gifs and that sort of thing. So
there was a period in my life where I'd say 98% of my conversation was Big Lebowski quotes. It's just one of those movies. I just watched it and then I thought, I'm going to watch this again, and then the next day I watched it, and
very good. If you like The Big Lebowski, you should watch Fargo as well. It's made by the same guys, and that's like it's like a quirky, one of those like films, but it's very, very good. Yeah, so I'd recommend if you've not already seen it.
And the TV spin-off for that was quite good as well.
It is good. It's Martin Freeman did it.
Martin Freeman, that's right.
Yeah, he was really good. I thought. Yeah, I thought he was really good, really suited to it. But yeah, the series was great as well.
Totally agree.
Yeah, not one I've seen, but I'll have to catch up with them.
yeah, worth
Yeah,
it.
totally recommend it, Pete. You'll like it. And it's one of those shows where they change the story kind of dramatically every season. You know, you can watch them all independently, really.
Yeah.
I haven't seen the last one, which I think's got fellow countryman Ewan McGregor in it, but I haven't seen that one yet. I've only seen the first 2 seasons, but no, all good stuff. Good stuff.
Amazing, good stuff. Again, we've talked about so many things that we could just go on and talk about these endlessly, which means we probably must do this again at some point. But one thing I simply must ask you is, I'd love to get your perspective as a female working in tech. Where do you feel that we are right now in terms of gender parity in terms of women in tech? Have you had any particular challenges yourself as a woman working in the tech industry? What's your perspective and on this issue?
I think it's definitely improved. You know, when I went to school, Rural No in Scotland, you had standard grades, not GCSEs. And we did administration, which was basically learning how to be a receptionist. You know,
I did administration, by the way.
Administration as well. There was some typing.
I get an A.
Oh, great. I moved to England before I could do my hires, unfortunately. Right. But that's another story. Why don't you do part 2? But yeah, so it was really there wasn't a lot of tech that you could study in school. It was administration where you learn the keyboard and, reception stuff. And yeah, going from that and then going into, I've been quite lucky in the sense of been given the opportunity by the company that I work for to do something with no experience in it, basically, and be given that chance and opportunity and not looked at all because of my gender. It's not come into play whatsoever. It's been on my capability, which is what I'm glad that it's not for that. Which has been great. I have had some negative experiences, not too much. It's just in terms of, if I'm doing a workshop and I'm the consultant who's there, people will ask me, "Oh, can I ask you a technical question? Is that okay? Would you know?" And I'm like, yes, you can. You can ask me that. It's fine. And then, it's been quite nice though, in terms of, how you can support situations like that. I'll have like a male colleague who's either they're in the sales team or, they're there and they'll usually direct the questions to the senior male in the room, which it happens often, but they'll be quite, no, this Kat, Kat will know that. I don't know that. Kat's the expert here, which is really nice. It's just, reaffirming and changing the perception of that person who's maybe just questioned, oh, she's a young woman, would she know anything? And there's been some patronizing and things like that, but there's always been someone in the room to support me when that happens. So I've been quite lucky in that respect. And I think that's one thing, that women will always be, will still be in that situation of questions. You might just not know as much as the man in the room. But having that support from colleagues to push it back, and that really helps. But it's definitely improving. I think in the community it's great. I think that in the tech community everyone's supporting everyone. It's all done on your capability, and there's no discrimination, there's no questioning of anything. I think it's just an old school perception from some people that I've come across in my life, but I think I've been quite lucky with it in my own experience. But I think it's improving, but there's still stuff that can be done, I think.
Oh yeah, absolutely brilliant. And we in our community, I think we're getting there. I think it needs to get a bit further, but we've got some great women in our community. We've had you're our third female guest on the show, but we've already had Carolina on and Izzy, who are just wonderful people, and so good at what they do and so generous with their time, and we love them to bits. But from my own perspective, I mean, the gray hair and the beard gives it away. I've been around a long time, and my first job was working at a law firm in the late 80s, and I was the office junior, which meant I had to do a bit of everything. I would go around the city delivering letters, doing the shredding, taking the mail to the post office, but I would also do stints on reception as well. And you mentioned admin reception. It historically has always been perceived as a female type role, but I never thought of it like that. I'll sit on reception. It was quite good fun, actually. So I've never quite understood that mindset of why we had these inequalities in the first place. It frustrates the heck out of me, and I think we all can do our bit to listen and learn and try and help and support all inequalities within our community and within our career. So hopefully we're heading in the right direction with many of those things. But there's some great groups out there as well. I always mention every time there's a fantastic Women in Teams group, which I'm very, very proud to be a part of as a male ally, which meets monthly, organized by Laurie Popmeyer at Microsoft. So go and check that out if you get the chance. We'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, absolutely. So I'm work to be done, but moving in the right direction, I think, is our report on that then.
Yeah.
But, fantastic. We don't get too much discrimination for people who don't like bearded people, do we, Roo?
It's usually dogs. Dogs bark at me. That's
right.
That's about it.
I thought you were going to say discrimination against people who prefer Terminator 1 to Terminator 2.
The difference is that's valid. That's valid.
Oh, fantastic. But what we'll have to do at some point, Roo and I have been talking about this, and we'll give this a little snippet away on our plans for this, is we've been talking about this. The platform we use for this podcast stroke YouTube show is called StreamYard, and you can go live on it as well. And we've been talking about just doing one live, random and unplanned, and getting lots of community people, seeing if they're available at that particular time, and getting them to hop on and just talk about stuff that comes to mind. So, and I can see us getting a really great debate with a ton of people about movies and the Big Lebowski and Star Wars and Terminator 2 and all sorts of things. So this is definitely something that we're going to have to do, definitely, without a doubt. So watch out for that. I say watch out for that. We'll probably not do it for weeks and months now, but but it's something we talked about, isn't it? But what a great conversation, though. We're at 55 minutes. I'm very conscious of time. Give you some of your Sunday back, which is when we're recording this. Kat, thank you so much for joining us. Before we sign off, is there anything else you'd like to share with the listeners and viewers, how they can reach you on social media and whatever else? Anything else you're doing at the minute, speaking and so on?
So there's a Women in Tech World Series happening in June with Michelle Obama's actually speaking at it.
Wow.
And it's so cool. And my face, I saw I was on the same page as Michelle Obama. I was like, oh my goodness,
Wow.
I can't believe it. What a moment in the career. So obviously she's the keynote speaker. So I will be presenting at that, as well as the Taste of M365 Chicago seminar, which is going to be virtual. So it's all about Teams telephony. A look at those features that I mentioned, and follow me on LinkedIn, Twitter, and then there's the blog collabwithkat.com as well, which you can follow. But yeah. Absolute pleasure to do the session today. So thank you so much for asking me to come on. It's great.
Oh, amazing. We've really enjoyed having you on, Kat, and we'll talk to you again very, very soon, I'm sure. So let's wind up the show, and I'll hand that over to you, Roo, because I'm not very good at it, as we all know.
Don't be daft. No.
This is going to be another running gag, isn't it, that I'm going to latch onto.
Yeah, freeze. No, it's fine. So I guess, obviously, thanks so much for joining us, Kat. That was great. What we'll do is we will put all the links to things we've discussed, finding you online, your upcoming sessions. We'll put those in the show notes so that folks can grab them on YouTube or on Spotify or wherever they're listening or watching. We'll wrap up the show for today, and hopefully we'll be back within the next week or two with another exciting guest in the Microsoft Cloud. Thanks everyone for listening.
Thank you.
Catch you down the road.